Hi, Max here. The video you're about to watch is not exactly finished, and I don't think it ever will be. But a lot of hard work went into it over a very long period of time, so rather than let it die on a hard drive somewhere, I figured it would be best to upload what I have. And what I do have here I think is pretty good, so I hope you enjoy watching it, just with the expectation that it's going to sort of just stop. More details at the end, but for now, I hope you enjoy, and let's roll the video. Hello, my name is Max, and recently, I read a book. That's not the whole video. The last time we were talking about anime was over on my couch in the living room, where I spent 15 minutes or so arguably going into detail about what the Isekai subgenre is. For those of you that had a much more valuable use of those 15 minutes, Isekai series typically focus on a main character getting whisked away or transported to another world, either by magic or some traffic accident or something like that. Some of them are pretty good. A lot of them aren't. It's a subgenre of fantasy media that's undeniably oversaturated. A lot of them typically devolve into some form of medieval fantasy with tangible RPG video game mechanics. In that previous video, I playfully described about 71 different anime series in one-sentence summaries of their core concepts. The video obviously wasn't meant to be taken seriously, and the time between coming up with the idea and eventually editing and putting out the video was probably around 3 days tops. I had not and still haven't seen most of the anime on that list. In fact, to be honest, I'm not even a huge fan of isekai anime. The hell are you looking at? Medieval fantasy really doesn't do it for me, and unfortunately, that's a huge barrier to entry for a lot of isekai series. Of course, there are some that I do enjoy. I like Re:Zero and Konosuba, Recreators and Devil's a Part-Timer. I think I like Log Horizon. I've only read like the first half of the light novel, and I didn't really like the anime by comparison, but the little I read I thought was like kind of interesting. I am a pretty big fan of Man with a Mission though, but overall it's a subgenre I mostly steer clear of. I know I'm probably not gonna like it, so I typically don't dip my toe in unless, say, there's a studio I like that's involved with it, or it has a distinctive art style, or if I'm familiar with the source material. That being said, it feels a little disingenuous to have made that previous video having so little experience in the subgenre personally. I do not like giving my opinion on media that I have not myself personally consumed. Secondhand experience is not a substitute for actually sitting down and watching or reading a show or series for yourself. So that's what I've set out to do. I took a look back at those 71 shows and decided to pick just one to go back and take a closer look at. I chose a title that stood out to me for better or for worse, and decided to give it a fair and honest shot. And the one that I settled on was number 70 of 71 in that original video, Reincarnated as a Sword.
Or the one about that guy blah 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 uses a sword.
Tensei Shitara Kendeshita, or Tenken, as I'll be calling it from now on, is a series written by Yu Tanaka with illustrations by Low. Originally published on the website Shosetsuka ni Naro, or Let's Be Novelist, as a hobby for Tanaka, Tenken steadily gained a large following before finally being published as a physical light novel by Micro Magazine on July 30th, 2016. The light novel made its way stateside on August 6th, 2019, published by Seven Seas Entertainment. As of this video, there are 12 published volumes of Tenken's light novel currently released in Japan, a manga adaptation, as well as an anime that has recently started airing, close to the release of this video. So why this series? And furthermore, why the light novel and not the anime adaptation? Well, to answer that question, we're gonna have to go back a bit. My first time seeing Tenken was not while I was doing research for my stupid isekai shitpost, but rather at a Barnes & Noble a couple of years back. I love physical books, and I love going to bookstores to look at physical books. I don't really like buying from stores though. You know, it's always so hard to start a new series from a bookstore because they always have like volumes 1, 2, 8, and 13. You can't just get like the first 3 volumes of a light novel or manga. Anyway, I still remember what drew me to Tenken when I first saw it in the bookstore those years ago. Obviously, the title, Reincarnated as a Sword, is about as on the nose as you can get, but after picking it up, I really liked how nice the book itself actually physically looked. However, a cover can never be trusted. Most exist for the sole purpose of tricking you, the reader. So at that point I realized I was too far in, decided to give the prologue chapter of the book a read. 658 words, less than 4 pages later, I decided to put the book back. And that was that. Flash forward to December 2021. I was back home visiting family, and me and my mom decided to go to the Barnes & Noble nearby where we live, as it's become kind of a tradition for us to go and sit in the stacks and drink coffee and just kind of look for random books and such. Her love of books and me, presumably, means that every time we go, she always has to get me something. Now look, my family has seen my living room. They have been in my office. They know what I'm about. I usually try to just default to something like an art book or a coffee table book, which was my previous collectible of choice before the government's funny COVID money got me addicted to collecting plastic figurines. But as I was going up and down the stacks, I once again stumbled upon this little book. By this point, I had already made that Isekai video, and I figured, now why not? You know, if anything, I could always quickly turn it into a silly little video sometime later on, right? And so after almost a full year, here we are. Reading Tenken has been a struggle. The book is not that long at just 377 pages. And while on stream, I'm a pretty huge fan of the Maxx can't read joke, I actually really enjoy reading, and I'm actually pretty good at it. I can knock out a typical light novel of 200 to 400 pages in about 1 4-hour sitting if I'm really focused on it. Tenken, by comparison, has taken me nearly 10 months to read. And I had to start over from the beginning about a week before I started writing this video. A video that has, at this point, been in production for about 9 months. Not consistently, as I'll get into much later, but this video has been lurking in my peripheral since long before an anime was even announced, with a due date later set to right before the anime's first episode aired. Now we're well into the fall 2022 anime season, and Tenken is almost done completely airing its first core. And you're just seeing this video now. I must have dragged it out because the book was so good. Speaking of, now that I've dragged this prologue out for so long that you're probably starting to wonder if this is a real video or not either, let's say we finally start talking about Tenken, or Reincarnated as a Sword. Reincarnated as a Sword is about a man who is reincarnated as a sword. It is not very good. The first thing that came to mind when I opened my eyes was how dark it was. Is it night? I stirred in an effort to get a better view of things and finally realized something. I couldn't move my body. What's this? What's happening to me? I thought I was tied up, but it didn't feel that straightforward. My whole body felt weird. I couldn't feel my arms and legs for one thing, and the rest of my body just felt off. Can't feel my eyelids either, or my eyeballs for that matter. Wait, so how am I seeing things exactly? I looked down to check my body. I was a bit worried at first, but it seemed I could move my vision to some degree. I'm a sword. The prologue chapter is, as I said, 4 pages long and serves to introduce us to our main character, a sentient sword that used to be a presumably sentient 30-year-old man before he was hit by a car. The last thing I remembered was a red convertible approaching me at breakneck speed. The flashy man in the driver's seat was looking at his smartphone. Yup, he had been playing with his phone while driving, and boy did he look like he was having a great time of it. Well, I'm not having a great time, asshole. Maybe he was reading a better light novel. This introductory chapter serves as a pretty good vertical slice for everything I dislike about this sword, who at this point does not have a name. It will eventually, and you'll fondly remember this moment when you didn't know how stupid it would end up being. The entire book is from the sword's perspective, whose personality is 3 equal parts not giving enough information, giving too much information, and Marvel Cinematic Universe one-liners. I somehow knew this sword was in fact my own body, impossible as that may be to understand, let alone explain. But I understood beyond the shadow of a doubt that the sword was me, and I was the sword. How could I see despite having a sword for a body? How mysterious. I died and was reincarnated as a sword? What absurd light novel was this? I pinched my cheek to make sure this wasn't a dream, but I lacked the ability to do so. This is a book. This is a story from the first-person perspective. You have a near infinite amount of time to explain exactly what you're feeling and how things are happening. This very book will take that time to explain a lot of things to you, and you will really wish it hadn't. The prologue ends with Mr. Sword. I'm just gonna call him Mr. Sword for now, wondering about being a sword or whether or not he's in an isekai. One last side note before we get too far in. I've never made a video about a book before, so I'm gonna try to structure this in as entertaining a way as possible. I'll be starting with a deep dive into Tenken's first chapter, where we'll be taking a look at how the book is written in exhaustive detail. I'm gonna be using a lot of direct lines and quotes from the book to just kind of show you what the act of reading Reincarnated as a Sword is actually like. Then I'll go over a much more broad summary of the rest of the book, because by that point we'll already have established the writing style, and you'll want me to shut up by that point, just trust me. I'll mostly be showing excerpts and illustrations from Tenken's light novel itself, but I'll also try to intercut scenes from the anime wherever I think they'll fit best. This was incredibly difficult to do for the first chapter, as I found out prior to writing this script. You see, about 90% of the book was actually mercifully cut for anime watchers. You see, this is a video about the book though. I will not be bestowing upon you such a kindness. Putting its best foot forward, Chapter 1 of Tenken might be the most monotonous, annoying, redundant pieces of writing I have ever had the mispleasure of reading in my entire life. And I'm saying that as I'm reading this script right now. Jumping from 4 pages to 97, this first chapter is entirely focused around Mr. Sword getting used to his new body. I took in my surroundings, which looked nothing like my Earth. If this were an alternate universe light novel, I would have some sort of cheat skill, I thought. Although, considering I had been reincarnated as a sword, I wondered if I could use any skills. Maybe being turned into a sword was itself my cheat skill, though I highly doubted it. It could just be wishful thinking, and I might not even have any overpowered skills to begin with. A staple of cheat skills would be identified. Oh, hello. It turned out I could look at my own stats. How convenient. Mr. Sword's actual cheat skill is projectionism. There are many, many times throughout this book where Mr. Sword will wish he had a particular ability or express concern over a particular predicament, which will then be solved within the next page or so, sometimes within the same paragraph. With the introduction of the Identify skill, the book starts to use these little text boxes to show whenever Mr. Sword is using Identify on a particular object or monster or person. It'll list a whole bunch of stats about whatever the sword happens to be analyzing, such as its health, its magic, its equipment, skills, inventory, that sort of thing. It's cute at first, but then it eventually becomes a crutch to just give the reader all the exposition they need, without any of those hack writing tricks like dialogue or descriptive world building or scene composition. Or, by the way, as far as the book goes, looking nothing like Earth is the only descriptive sentence we get for the setting of Tenken in the entire first book. We then learn a little more about our relatable protagonist. Despite not being able to recall his name, he is able to remember pretty much everything else. 30 years old, male, office worker, lived alone, hobbies, anime, manga, VR MMOs, novels of the light variety. People told me I had a positive outlook on life, liked curry, didn't have any foods I particularly disliked, no girlfriend. I'd never been in a relationship now that I thought about it. Well, that's kind of sad. Wow, what an interesting and complex character. Look, tons of light novels focus on an otaku main character. That's fine. Well, it's not, but yeah. But normally the age range of the main character is a bit closer to the target audience. This is a teen novel starring a 30-year-old man who acts like a 13-year-old most of the time. It just seems like extra steps. I personally love the distinction that he doesn't just like MMOs, he likes VR MMOs. Doesn't come up, at least not in this book, so it really just feels like the most market-tested description for a light novel protagonist. Now, to his credit, he does take becoming a sword incredibly well. A sword, though? Really? I couldn't eat, I couldn't play video games, and man, there went my chances of graduating from virginity. Then again, this meant I was going to be a wizard for sure. This was the cross I had to bear for the rest of my life. I didn't know how long I sulked. Could have been 5 minutes, could have been an hour. The more I sank into my dumbfounded silence, the more stupid I felt for being upset. Well, I'm a sword now. No use worrying about that kind of stuff. This was my unexpected second lease on life. I may as well aim to live the best possible sword life I could. In fact, he takes it so well that I can no longer relate to him as a character, let alone a human being. Yeah, becoming a sword is probably better than dying, but I'd still think it would take longer than 4 pages to really get over it. Continuing to ponder what the best sword life could possibly be, Mr. Sword decides that he would rather not be wielded by some muscle-headed hero. If it came down to it, I'd much rather have a girl wield me. It'd be best if she was cute, but I'd be able to live with her if she wasn't completely ugly. The hell do you want me to add to that? 3 days later, a couple goblins show up to try and pull him out of the stone. Mr. Sword absolutely slaughters them. Surprisingly enough, my first kill didn't disturb me. Instead, it excited me. In fact, I thought it was the obvious thing to do to a goblin who was right in front of me. I didn't feel an ounce of guilt as I killed the next goblin. Even as I cut him open, I didn't feel the least bit disgusted. Maybe it was because I had the body of a sword now, but I didn't feel any aversion to slashing through my enemies. In its place was an odd sense of fulfillment. I was doing my job as a sword after all. We can add Sociopath to the list of main character traits from the start of the chapter. Tenkan is unlike any book I have ever read in my entire life, in the sense that it doesn't really read like a book. The writing style is split directly down the middle between an excited middle schooler telling you about a crazy adventure they definitely went on over summer break, and a game FAQ that goes way, way, way too in-depth on the mechanics of the game they're talking about. Let's just say if Tenkan were a game FAQ, they definitely wouldn't have bothered to put in any of that cool ASCII art. I'm about to read a large excerpt from the book directly at you, but I can't stress enough, it's the only way you're going to understand what I mean here. Oh god, this is a lot of reading. Why'd I write it like this? Am I glowing right now? I emitted light on my 3rd, maybe 4th kill. I think I glowed on my 2nd kill too, but I paid no attention to it then, thinking I was imagining things. I guess I hadn't been, although I was pretty sure I didn't glow when I killed my 1st goblin. I opened my stats to check if anything had changed. It looked like I had gained some new items among my stats. The new description next to the evolution menu specifically caught my eye. My crystal count was at 3 out of 100. Did that have anything to do with the 3 times I glowed earlier? And what of my skill capacity? I didn't know what that one meant either, only that it had something to do with skill bank, which came after it. I figured that I only kept the skills of the goblins if I glowed after killing them, since I didn't have vigilance or poison resistance from my first victim. So I absorbed the goblin's skills? I picked skill bank and heard a voice that sounded like a tutorial guide. I had a feeling it was linked to the things called crystals. They cropped up often in alternate universe light novels. From what I'd read, they were crystallizations of magic found within the bodies of monsters. If my assumptions were correct, it had something to do with the way I killed the first goblin. I'd killed him by cutting his throat, while finishing the rest off by stabbing them. That could be the difference. As I thought, I absorbed crystals by cutting through them, and it seemed the goblins had theirs located in their stomach. I looked at my crystal count. Like I thought, my crystal counter was now at 4 out of 100, and vigilance and poison resistance had been added to my skill bank list. The goblin leader had disassembly 2, and his flunky had dig 2, but the skills I absorbed were both at level 1. I guess the levels had been reset after absorption? So how do I level these skills up? Was using them in battle enough? Would I need to keep absorbing more crystals? I would have to experiment with these too. For now, I would equip vigilance and poison resistance. If you think this is really dry and boring and you're just waiting for me to get to the point, congratulations, buddy, you found it. This entire chapter is 97 pages of the sword killing things and acquiring new skills and discussing how he's gonna set up his skill loadout. Exactly like this. Because, yeah, Mr. Sword can just take the skills of whatever monster he ends up killing, and he's gonna kill a lot more monsters. Wouldn't even bother me as much if they actually described the fights, but every fight goes the exact same way. He'll talk about how cool having a particular skill will be and how it won't be easy to take on a monster like that. And then he'll say some dumb shit like, "Put 'em up. Your crystals are your life." I promise you, I wasn't overcome with bloodlust or anything of the sort. I just wanted to say that line at least once in my life was all. And then it'll be like a page and a half of talk about how useful the new skill will be. Oh, and every incremental stat change that comes along with it. I've heard many times about a whole bunch of different isekai series that, well, I mean, the story might not be good, but the world building totally owns, dude. Yeah, no, I could definitely say I'm learning about the world, or at least the system mechanics of the world, right down to every numerical detail, but it's tedious. It's extraneous information. It doesn't enrich the world. It doesn't build a better story. I wanted all the upgrades, but I knew I wasn't going to have enough points for all of them. I ended up picking increased skill levels since it looked like that was going to let me level up the skills in my skill bank. However, it looked like I had to level them up one at a time. I picked Sword Mastery to see what would happen, and it told me I needed 2 points to level it up. Actually, most of my skills only needed 2 points to level up, with the exception of Poison Fang and Flotation, which needed 5. I wondered what the cause of the difference was and speculated that it had something to do with the fact that Poison Fang and Flotation didn't have numbers indicating their skill levels. Whoa, this is awesome! I could actually become the world's strongest sword! Haha, now I'm motivated. This is 44 pages into the book now. I have spent 44 pages in the brain of this character, and I don't know anything about his personality, except that he doesn't mind women that aren't too ugly, and that he might be a goblin racist. I don't think Mr. Sword's cool because he's getting all these skills. I think that the stakes are getting smaller and smaller. The first third of the book feels like a grind, which I guess makes sense because it is essentially a grind. But then again, how detailed can you really be about these fights? I didn't have an anime when I initially read this chapter, so the only thing I could imagine in my head is taking the physics gun in Gary's mod and just kind of waving a crowbar around. Now I'm really motivated. I'll hunt every last monster in these parts to extinction. So, let's talk about the goblin genocide. Eventually, Mr. Sword grows tired of hunting smaller prey, so he decides to take on a whole horde of goblins. He does this by following a scouting group back to their goblin nest. I observed that the goblins would break into a dance at times and be completely entranced by a formation of ants at another. All in all, they wasted so much time getting to where they were going, which I found irritating. So irritating, in fact, that I thought about killing them at multiple points during the observation. I wanted to give myself a pat on the back for showing restraint. After only about a page and a half, Mr. Sword has slaughtered most of the goblins and their king. Look, I'm sure you've heard of that Goblin Slayer fellow, and I'm not exactly a fan of the little green guys either, but they were mostly unprovoked in this situation. Mr. Sword ends up killing a few goblin mages and gets access to fire magic and the mage class. Now I can use magic too. It was every nerd's dream to use magic in an alternate universe after all. And seeing that I was a nerd myself, my excitement was a foregone conclusion. Now I have all the XP. After slaughtering the stragglers and absorbing their crystals, I left the goblin nest with something akin to a full stomach. On his flight back to the pedestal, which, as a reminder, in my mind looked like this, Mr. Sword is attacked by a lesser wyvern, and for the first time, it actually seems like kind of a threat. He goes into like annoying detail about how his echolocation skill didn't detect the wyvern and how it did a massive amount of damage to his health. And yeah, echolocation, he killed a bat. You're just gonna have to get used to me saying new skills without any context. Believe me, I read pages of context so that you wouldn't have to. You'd resort to an ambush, you coward? Now you might be thinking, but you ambush monsters all the time. And you'd be right. But it was okay if I did it because I was a sword. Why does that make it okay, you ask? Well, because being on the receiving end of an ambush also pissed me off. I don't like Mr. Sword. In what is the first fight to take up more than a double-page spread, a quote-unquote epic battle takes place, where Mr. Sword actually takes a significant amount of damage to his durability. Then, rather than just relying on picking a skill that he's learned like it's some kind of turn-based RPG, he actually has to use a bit of strategy to use the wyvern's momentum against itself. Look, it's not exciting. It's not innovative. It's boring, in fact, but it's the closest thing I've gotten to fight choreography in the first 60 pages of this book. After the battle, Mr. Sword is low on durability. He's in really bad shape. Chunks of his blade are just like missing, and he's lamenting the inefficiency of his healing abilities. Considering how long it took for self-repair to work, it was probably going to take more than a night to get back to my original shape. It's actually a pretty sticky situation for him to be in. You'd actually have to come up with a pretty clever solution to... Wait, what is he? I focused my energy and visualized self-repair energy flooding my blade in the hopes it would speed things up. Granted, it was a silly speculation, but what's this? My blade was now glowing brighter. This might just work. Wait, what? It hasn't even been a paragraph yet. I was now consuming mana at a rate of 1 MP per second. My mana consumption wasn't without merit, however, when I had recovered the entirety of my blade in about 3 minutes' time. I guess there aren't any threats in this world. At all. My man might as well have been a handle, and it took him 3 minutes to fully recover. He even had mana to spare. Why worry about the outcome of fights? Why stress about whether our heroes will pull through? I didn't even get the chance to think about pretending to think about the outcome of this battle before the situation had just completely resolved itself. More time was given to the uneventful trip back to the pedestal than was given to the dramatic tension of this moment. Who cares? Want to learn how magic works? I finally have it. I have ceased to be a mere sword, Jojo. 30-year-old salaryman, by the way. The next eternity spent reading is focused on Mr. Sword experimenting with magic, but honestly, I'd have to be a complete sadist to subject you to that. I wanted to know which skills I needed to equip to cast magic. I began by unequipping the 2 skills which obviously had nothing to do with magic, mineralogy and command. With Staff Mastery, Battle Staff, Fire Magic up, small, and Mana Manipulation still equipped, I cast Fire Arrow again. That worked. I then unequipped Staff Mastery and Battle Staff. Fire Arrow! No problems there. I unequipped Fire Magic up, small, and found I was still able to cast magic. This time I unequipped Mana Manipulation so that Fire Magic was the only magic-related skill I had equipped. Nope. I re-equipped Mana Manipulation. Fire Arrow. Whoosh. It was at this point where I felt that in addition to listening to a middle schooler and reading a game FAQ, that it also felt like I had a boring live streamer in another tab trying to think through their decision-making process out loud. And I know a thing or two about boring streamers. I have to deal with one every time I hit start broadcasting. I was able to expend Spirit to unleash devastating attacks called Sword Arts. There was the Double Slash, which allowed me to attack twice, and the Heavy Slash, which was a devastating strike sure to kill most enemies. They looked intriguing. I acquired various weapon skills, which included my most frequently used Sword Mastery and Sword Arts, both of which were now at level 3. Leveling Sword Mastery to level 3 really made a difference, as I could manipulate my blade, which was really my body, much better, and I was much more efficient at striking the enemy's vital parts as well. I could deflect the attacks of some of the larger monsters too. This really was the most important skill to have if you have a sword for a body. There isn't anything back there for you. Now, it was at this point that I thought the book had gone into full-on parody, or at the very least, it was a practical joke pulled on me by the bookstore. And after finally watching the anime, which we'll get to, I now know that this was supposed to read as a lighthearted comedy, but there's no charm in any of the writing or the monologuing. I've read spreadsheets with more personality than this stupid sword. None of this has helped that we are now almost a third of the way through the book, and no other characters have been introduced yet. You are now stuck in a never-ending, one-sided conversation with the guy that has to tell you everything about the game he's currently playing. And it doesn't matter how many times you say, "Damn, bro, that's crazy." They do not hear you. And don't comment that down below either. He has to say something else. During his break from culling the local wildlife, Mr. Sword discovers that he has obtained the bestiary skill, which he uses to further examine the goblins that he's been killing. The description reads that goblins are evil by nature and that they should be exterminated without discretion. Which, okay, I guess if a text box says it, that sort of excuses the goblin racism? The description for high goblins, though, mentions that they are direct servants to the demon god, which leads to maybe the dumbest paragraph in the whole book. Still, I was amazed to discover that gods existed in this world. I didn't know whether the gods here were self-proclaimed superhumans or actual gods, but I didn't want to run into them either way. Gods and religions were both annoying to me. Leave your crystals at the door. And so, I carried on my hunt for monsters. Yeehaw! You were reincarnated as a sword. Okay, let's pick up the pace. Sword goes to the outer reaches of his starting area where the more dangerous prey lays. He encounters a big, scary slime and exclaims, "I'd probably die if I committed to a frontal assault." Before saying not 5 lines later, "That just means I'll have to send you to your grave with one attack. Your death will be quick and painless." Whatever, man, go for it. It works. And Mr. Sword gains access to a skill called Pocket Dimension, which is just infinite inventory storage. By the way, there is a hard limit on equipable skills, but earlier in the book, Mr. Sword obtains a skill called Split Mind, which allows you to basically think with two separate minds at the same time. Now, the caveat would be that if you were a human, it would slowly rip your mind apart, but because he's a sword and he doesn't have a brain, that just has no effect on him. So Mr. Sword is able to actively fight while swapping his skills out mid-battle, which ostensibly means that the skill limit has no meaning to him at all. After killing the 4 boss monsters of the Plains area, Mr. Sword decides to explore beyond the boundaries of the forest, and accidentally yeets himself directly into a magic-absorbing patch of land. This is where I got tricked a second time. The clay's mana-draining properties completely prevent Mr. Sword from escaping, and for the first time, we actually see our protagonist struggle. He decides to wait for a traveler to come along to free him from his prison, but nobody comes, and Mr. Sword starts to panic. A month had gone by and no one had come to my rescue. Please, I'm a really good sword, top quality in fact. I was enchanted and I could think and move for myself. You couldn't get a better deal if you tried. You ever seen a sword that can cook? Well, look no further. See, I'll even max out the skill for it right now. I have Identify too. I'll even level it up for you right now. And I'm one hell of a fighter. My sword mastery and sword art skills are at level 7, you know. You want me to throw in some magic in there too? No problem. How's Fire Magic 10 sound? Just equip me, and you'll be one hell of a fighter too. How's that? I'm not some random piece of junk, and would you look at this skill right here? Help! I was getting delusional now. I could have sworn I heard someone talk. This might be the end of me. Help me! It's actually pretty great to see our overpowered hero get thoroughly defeated by something as innocuous as a magic patch of land. We get to see Mr. Sword break down as he starts begging for assistance for another person, dumping points into skills to make himself more desirable, not for himself, but for whoever might happen to come along and finally free him. Just then, a carriage comes flying out of the forest before flipping over in front of where he was stuck. The caravan of meekly dressed, emaciated people crawled from the wreckage, heavy collars adorning their necks. A man dressed in much better clothes cracks a whip at the men and women. I don't want to read this. I don't really want to read these lines, so instead I'm going to get text-to-speech to read them.
Hey, get the slaves to carry the goods. Yeah, so you heard the man. Hurry up, you serve your man.
Mr. Sword capstones this chapter with what might be the dumbest singular line in the entire book. I guess this is a world with slaves. Suddenly, a twin-headed bear emerges from the woods, and the chapter ends. Nope. And there you have it. Hi, Post-Roll Maxx here. Recording this for the 3rd time, because OBS keeps fucking the recording up. I don't normally do these out-of-character, talking directly to you kind of segments in my videos, and I don't plan on doing them in the future, but I feel like for this one in particular, it was kind of necessary. You see, there probably isn't going to be a second part to this video. Like I said before, I have been working on this for a very long time. Production technically started in December of 2021, and while there are any number of excuses I could make for why it's taken me so long, at the end of the day, I just don't think I liked making a video about something, well, I didn't like. When I originally started, there was a very clear vision in mind for where this video was going. In fact, everything that you have seen up until this point was written in a single night. But afterwards, I just completely lost steam and I hit a pretty massive bout of writer's block that never really went away. So rather than have this continue to sit on a hard drive where no one can see it, I figured it would be better to just put it out there so you can see what I did manage to get done. Because there's a lot of stuff in this video that I actually really like. I did manage to write a good bit of funny bits for a potential second half to this video, but as of right now, I don't have any plans of actually making it. If I come up with a good idea to kind of tie everything together, I might. But, like I said, for right now, no promises. When you're working on something for this long, it is incredibly easy to kind of lose sight of why you started in the first place. And the more I delayed and tried to write and tried to kind of free-form ideas for the video, at a certain point, the video was just getting really long for the sake of being really long. It wasn't like the Endless 8, where I hit the exact minute count I wanted to, and I felt like that video was properly paced and, you know, not a lot of time was wasted. I still think that this first half feels that way to me, but no matter what I tried to write, I just couldn't make the second half tie everything together in a cohesive bow. There just wasn't a point to the video other than to rag on a book I don't like. And if this experience has taught me anything, it's that I don't enjoy working on content for media that I don't personally enjoy. That being said, I didn't get to talk about it in this video, but the anime for Reincarnated as a Sword is actually pretty fine. It's okay. It's not like amazing, but it's totally watchable, and Fran's cute, and they actually, you know, show what the world looks like. That's kind of exciting. So thank you so much for watching. I never say this in my videos, but please subscribe if you enjoyed this at all, and look forward to videos in the future that will probably have an actual ending. Definitely, maybe. I've got a lot of ideas for shorter videos, so going forward, I think I'm going to try some new things that kind of don't fit the typical format that I've been abiding to so far. I'm kind of just going to start making whatever I want, and we'll see what sticks and what's fun and what you guys enjoy. So make sure you tell me in the comments what you like seeing, and I'll try to do more of that. But that's all. Sorry that this video kind of just stops, but I just wanted to get it out. I honestly, I have been sitting on this for so long, and it has caused me to be, I've been paralyzed by this video and just have not been able to move onward and work on anything else. So now that this is up, I'm looking forward to being able to focus my attention elsewhere, try new things, and, you know, try to give you guys the best content I possibly can. So look forward to that. Thank you for sitting through this little post-roll, and I will catch you guys on the next one.